Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Opportunities in Asia Pacific's Largest Economies. And I'm here today with three of our partners, and I'm going to introduce them in a bit. But I'm very happy to have you, and I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion. We have structured today's webinar as a panel discussion, so there is not going to be presentations, but we're going to do our best to really explain in a concise manner everything we have experienced in the past couple of months since COVID started, and as well before that, about how to enter some of the most exciting markets in Asia Pacific. And for those of you that haven't attended webinars before with us or that haven't actually worked with us, my name is Victor. I'm the COO at Greenhouse, and I typically look, among other things, after our webinars and business development efforts. These are my contacts if you would like to reach out to me with any business opportunities. And I would like to invite our speakers today, one by one, to introduce themselves, starting with Miguel. Miguel, why don't you say a couple of words about yourself and introduce yourself?
Hi, Victor. Thank you very much for the introduction. Well, my name is Miguel Latorre. I'm Managing Director of Vishnu in Indonesia. I'm from Spain, but I've been living outside of Spain for the past 20 years, living in Germany, in Scotland, Australia, Brussels, and 15 years in Indonesia. I founded Global Expand in 2013, and it was acquired by Vistra almost 3 years now. And I'm running the operations of Vistra in Indonesia ever since. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel. And next, I would like to invite Nick to introduce himself as well, who's going to be representing China today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Victor, for the introduction. So my name's Nick. I'm a part of the Fastlane Group. We are a Hong Kong-based accounting and advisory firm. So we're a one-stop solution for our clients, ranging from company formation to accounting to audit and even HR and payroll. So I started my career at KPMG doing M&A advisory. So a lot of my experience is around expansion into China and really helping companies move in and out of the jurisdiction. Currently at Fastlane, I am a part of the business development team, and I'm leading the service line for international company formation. So very involved with China at the moment.
Thank you very much, Nick. And last but not least, I would like to invite Vishnu, who is representing India today. Vishnu, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Victor. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Vishnu Krishna. I am a director at an Indo-Italian management consultancy called Octagona India Ltd. As a company, we help foreign companies, European, could be based anywhere around the world, enter the Indian market sustainably. And a bit like what Nick said, we also help in doing the back end of our clients like accounts, taxation, payroll, legal, all kinds of advisory, HR, and so on. I've been working for the last 21 years, and I have kind of split my time almost equally between the Japanese for the first 6.5, 7 years, and then around the same time with the Australians, and now working with Europeans mainly. So I'm looking forward to this discussion and to hearing some questions from all of you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, now that you know all the speakers, I'm just going to give you a very quick 2-slide introduction of Greenhouse, and afterwards we're going to dive into today's presentation. So essentially why we started Greenhouse is to find and introduce you to people like today's speakers, right? So what we do is that we find most qualified service providers in some of the most exciting yet very difficult markets on the planet, mainly based in Asia Pacific. And we help companies to understand who would be the most ideal service provider for their needs, and in that way, helping them enter these markets. We get involved quite early, sometimes when companies are still considering to enter a market. And then, we help them with some business development efforts just to test the market. And afterwards, we help them be introduced to some of the people that are on this call today. And yeah, essentially, our product is a marketplace for qualified service providers that are offering market entry services ranging from market research all the way to posting corporation services such as accounting, tax, payroll, bank account setup. So all in all, I think we have more than 100 service providers across 15 countries, and we offer something like 40 services to our clients. And yeah, that's it pretty much, about us. I don't want to dive too much into Greenhouse. You can check our website, greenhouse.co. And today we're going to have a panel discussion. Once again, I understand that we're going to be covering a lot of markets, and it's kind of hard to cover every topic. So we're going to do our best, and we're going to try to be concise because there's so much to say about these markets. And because the world is going through another wave of lockdowns, or at least some parts of the world are going through that, I think a suitable place to start is to talk a bit about COVID and what opportunities are we seeing across the three markets that are present today as a result out of COVID. So why don't we start with Miguel? Miguel, could you share a bit about the opportunities that you're seeing coming out in Indonesia as a result of COVID?
Well, it's actually a very good question. Nowadays, the word COVID is in all conversations. And now, in terms of opportunities for COVID, I would say I would like to divide this into two. Okay, one of them is the general opportunities in the sector. For example, all about the online services, online, how you say, food delivery and so on. You can imagine also in cities like Jakarta and others in other Indonesian cities is booming a lot. Okay. Also, all about the healthcare is, again, doing amazing this year. It was already doing great before COVID, but it's booming also this year. And then the other division, because I know I have to be very concise, I have other two gentlemen waiting. I would like to say also in terms of our industry, what we can see it's because of a lot of layoff and downsizes of many companies. What we see is that a lot of companies, no matter the size, they are outsourcing a lot of services. Unlike the same like Nick and Vishnu in India and China, we are providing all those services, accounting, tax, payroll, CorpSec, and so on and so on. And maybe the second quarter was a drop, but I would say the last couple of months, we could see a big increase in opportunities for us. And actually, I can tell you now, this month of November is already amazing for us. We are picking up very well. So at least, I think for us, it's getting even better.
Nice. Thank you very much, Miguel. And I would like to continue with looking at China. And Nick, could you share if you're seeing the same thing? So Miguel talked about a lot of opportunities in general, digital online businesses, healthcare, and outsourcing professional services like accounting, payroll, tax. Do you see the same trends in China, or have you experienced something else?
Yeah, definitely have seen something along similar lines. I think previously, in the past, a lot of FDI in China was really focused on the manufacturing sector. Of course, in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of factors that have shifted the popular industries more towards that of high tech. And this is due to a couple of reasons. Number one is since the Trump administration, we've really seen a lot of the US and a lot of European countries kind of impose stricter FDI restrictions on overseas investment. So this has seen China shift their focus from outbound investment to more inbound. And they've done a lot of policy changes to really encourage this. So first, we see they were lowering a lot of barriers for entry for foreign investment. And they've done this by shortening the negative list. So the negative list is a whole bunch of industries which have restrictions on FDI. We've seen China not only make this smaller, but actually expand the opposite, which is the encourage industry catalog. So this is specifically industries where the Chinese government is looking for foreign investment. So by doing so, they really look to streamline the approval process, have discounted prices for investment in land, and improve tax incentives and subsidies. And a lot of the industries that are being focused on this list do relate to IT, high tech, and technology. So this is something we have been seeing.
Nice. So once again, we see a lot of IT and high tech technology in general growth. And also as a result of what's been happening politically around the world, I guess, Vishnu, you're getting more business down in India. So how is it going for you during COVID? Like what opportunities are you seeing? Yeah, how is it on your end?
Well, things have started to pick up again because we were also in lockdown for a few months, but starting from July or August, really, we started progressively unlock 1, 2, 3, and now we are in phase 5. And pretty much if you walk around any Indian city, you would not feel the difference today as opposed to what it was prior to COVID. I'm not sure whether that's a healthy sign, but economically, we've started to move ahead. The days of lockdown actually changed the habits of literally thousands and hundreds and thousands of Indians. They started to now depend more on their electronic devices, cell phone, laptops to do their day-to-day activities, because there was no choice. They couldn't have gone outside and things like that. So online industry, whether you talk about cab hailing, food delivery, e-commerce in general, purchasing day-to-day items from online has picked up immensely. I mean, sitting here in my house, I can order anything from furniture to a car, or any of the smaller items that you can think of. The second one is online education. Schools and colleges still remain closed, and children are now forced to study from their homes. So online education, the formal, which is delivered by school, and informal, which is tuition classes, are all now being delivered through online media. So this has severely impacted the lives of Indians around the country. The second one is healthcare. Prior to COVID, India has a lot of hospitals around, but in terms of number of beds per 1,000 people, we are one of the lowest, simply because the population is so high. And that has, with the outbreak of COVID and whatever happened in the last 7 to 8 months, now the difference is quite clear that we do not have the right kind of healthcare infrastructure. We need to have more hospitals, specialized and general, at every level. Small community hospitals, large specialized 200, 300, 500 bed hospitals. And so anybody that has anything to do with healthcare, whether it's building hospitals or supplying medical devices, testing and diagnostic devices, everyone has an opportunity in India today. And lastly, the government is pushing a lot of local manufacturing. They're inviting companies from around the world to come to India and set up their manufacturing facilities. There's an investment promotion agency called Invest India. We have good contacts with them. That promises to cut red tape and bureaucracy and so on, and make life for an average investor who is thinking of manufacturing anywhere in India much easier, much faster. So you get all your licenses very quickly. The land clearance is given very quickly, and so on and so forth. So I would say these are the top three promising effects of the COVID-19.
Nice. And what initiative, you mentioned a little bit about what initiatives the government organizations are having. Can you talk, Vishnu, a little bit about the support that the government is providing for everyone right now?
Yeah. When this COVID broke out, I think almost every country's government announced a stimulus package for the economy, and they related it to percentage points of the GDP. So the Indian government they said something similar, that our stimulus package is about 20% of the GDP size. But when you shift the layers and you know that there are some politicians speaking here, you realize that it's not always exactly equal to 20%. But then 20% of a large amount is still high. The government that came out in a support scheme in terms of both corporates and individuals. Talking about corporates, firstly, they delayed all kinds of deadlines, whether it's filing your taxes, doing the annual general meeting of your company, to 31st December. So what was 30th of September earlier has become 30th. So this is not a monetary incentive, but this is more like giving you a little bit of a comfort that, okay, we do not stick to the same deadlines for this year. On the monetary side, the government lowered the corporate tax for new manufacturing companies. So if you are a new entrant into India, if you set up a subsidiary in India for manufacturing, you are going to pay one of the lowest taxes anywhere compared in Asia. And I have those comparisons in detail, which I can share with anyone offline. Secondly, they raised the investment level across many sectors. For example, defense, in a boost to improve self-reliability in the defense and military equipment. So now it is up to 74%, what used to be 49% 6 to 7 months ago. Renewable energy, the government is strongly focused on clean and green, and that has been a focus of this current Indian government, federal government, for a long time. and they are still continuing to push. So I would say these are the main incentives. There are lots of other small bits and pieces, but I prefer to give my co-panelists a chance to speak about their countries. But on the larger level, these were some of the points.
All right. So essentially, we see delayed deadlines and particular industries being chosen and lowering taxes in these industries like manufacturing, defense, renewable energy. What about Indonesia, Miguel? Are we seeing something similar? How are the incentives in Indonesia, and especially for foreign businesses, if any?
Yeah, so actually what the big news now in Indonesia is the Omnibus Law. For those of you who don't know, probably are not in Indonesia because everyone is already aware of this. The Omnibus Law is basically a comprehensive bill that will regulate many provisions in many industry sectors into only one law. And basically is seeking strengthening, the economy in Indonesia. It was already planned before COVID, but it was sort of a few months ago was actually sort of a slowdown, and a few weeks ago was already approved by President Jokowi. And again, it's a set of laws and support from the government in many ways. Okay, one of them, for example, which is unconfirmed, by the way, it's probably is going to be abolished the minimum investment for foreign companies. This one actually we are trying to get information from all sources, including the government, and it's not confirmed, but unofficially, apparently, it's going to be abolished. The minimum investment for foreign companies, which at the moment is 10 billion rupiah, which is around 650,000 US dollars. And generally, a company have to make that commitment prior coming to Indonesia with a paid-up capital of 25%. I insist, this is actually probably one of the most critical parts of the Omnibus Law, besides many other regulations covering the labor law and so on and so on. But another one very interesting is some tax incentives, like also it was approved prior COVID by implementing now, is a reduction of the corporate income tax to 22% next year from 25, and it's going to be reduced to 20% in 2022. So anyway, besides this, what we can see is a big support in general to all foreign businesses, eliminating many regulatory regulations, removing gray areas. I've been in Indonesia for a while, and sometimes when you read the regulation, it's difficult to read it. Okay, even for the people in the government as well, everything is gray. So we are trying to give some color, either black or white, to all these regulations. And with this Omnibus Law, we are going to do it, hopefully. And well, I would say all in all is basically this. Also, for example, for manufacturing companies, I know the government is supporting a lot. Is trying to bring a lot of manufacturing companies, trying to take them from China or from other countries in Southeast Asia into Indonesia, supporting with land acquisition rights and so on and so on. So all in all, again, the support from the Indonesian government is quite good, I would say.
Nice. So very interesting. I think China is similar in the sense that, I don't think it's such a large reform that is happening, but Nick did mention that there are some changes, especially with regards to the negative investment list. So Nick, why don't you elaborate on what kind of incentives exist today as a result of COVID in China for foreign businesses?
Sure. I think in regards to the different support schemes and incentives that the Chinese government can provide, you can really separate them into what they were planning pre-COVID and then what they've really done as a result of COVID. So we've seen pre-COVID that they've done a lot of stuff, from lowering the barriers of entry by showing the negative list, expanding the encouraged industry list, and implementing a lot of free trade zones. This is a lot of what we've seen before COVID. After COVID, earlier this year, the Chinese government has announced a lot of plans to really expedite this process and provide more support to these already existing schemes. So we've seen Chinese government announce three additional free trade zones. In the beginning of 2020, they started announcing plans to really trying to level the playing field between domestic companies and foreign investment enterprises. So by doing so, they're really creating a level playing field from a legal perspective. So what we can see is that foreign companies now, there's a lot less bureaucracy. when incorporating a company into China. There's a lot more protection legally in aspects such as trademarks. And they're really trying to make the process more friendly for foreigners who want to come in. Previously, if you wanted to open a company in China, you have to come and have like a physical presence in the country. The procedures have to be done inside China themselves. But now we're really seeing them try to digitize all their systems. So there's now paper filings and records. So that's what we've seen kind of before COVID that they've kind of been trying to push forward. As a response of COVID directly, we've seen the government really look to help local companies and foreign investors in 4 primary ways. The number one is financial support. So the People's Bank of China is really encouraging banks to offer loans to SMEs, both domestic and foreign, at much lower interest rates than they normally were. So a lot of companies now have a lot better access to funding for expansion. Another thing that they're looking to expand upon is that they're providing a lot of tax incentives for industries, primarily in the Greater Bay Area. So the Greater Bay Area is kind of a scheme to connect the province of Guangdong and all the major cities inside to create kind of a mega city, as they call it, where each participant city each specializes in their own thing. For example, Hong Kong is specializing in finance, Shenzhen is in manufacturing, and they're looking to create incentives for companies that are working within these areas. So a big one we've seen lately is a lot of foreign entrepreneurs looking to create tech companies and consulting companies in Tianhai. Now, the benefit of doing so is that as opposed to the normal corporate income tax rate of 25%, we're seeing that now companies can enjoy a much lower tax rate of 15%. Another response to COVID is we've seen a lot of, we've seen the Chinese government really trying to encourage employment. So they're providing subsidies to firms to not lay workers off and to recruit more fresh graduates. And then also we're seeing them trying to really boost productivity. So there's a lot of subsidies now for companies, domestic and foreign, to really digitize themselves. So they're really looking to subsidize this transformation, and they're looking to really create an environment where all companies can really experience, have the best platform to really conduct business.
Right. Well, now that we touched on all the benefits and all the good things that are happening to attract foreign businesses, it makes sense to also talk about the bad things or the challenges. Like, for example, Miguel mentioned that in Indonesia is about $650,000 the investment that the foreign business needs to make in order to enter the market. Well, of course, depending on what they plan to do in this market. But how are things in China? Like, what is the paid-up capital that needs to be invested by foreign businesses?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So in the past, the minimum capital requirement to open a wholly owned foreign entity in China was around 500,000 RMB. This rule has since been abolished. So there's currently no minimum capital requirements to open a company in China if you are a foreigner. The one consideration, though, that people really need to be aware of is that although there are no minimum capital requirements, when you are opening up a company, the Chinese authorities will look to see how much capital you're putting in as an initial injection. So they'll use the amount you put in to kind of see and judge whether this is enough to really maintain a company's operation for 1 year. So this is, although there's no minimum capital requirement now, this is something that companies need to take into consideration. So a lot of times we'd be asked, well, how much do you recommend us put into a company? And at the end of the day, that really depends on what industry you're in. I think at the very least, for those looking to incorporate in China, they should at least be able to justify that their initial injection of capital will be enough to sustain their operations for at least 1 year and have documentary proof to back that up.
Right. So that's a very interesting way to handle that, I guess. And what about in India? Like, what is the expected investment that the foreign business needs to make?
Surprisingly, there is no differentiation between a foreign company or an Indian company when you are talking about the minimum capital requirements. And as of now, the figure floats around less than US dollars 1,500. In rupees, it's 100,000 rupees, but when you convert, it's little less than 1,500 US dollars. So that's the minimum capital. But I go back to what Nick said, and depending on what your nature of the business is, are you a service company or a trading company or a manufacturing company or combination of all this, you need to yourself see what is the capital that you will need until you start plowing back revenues that you earn from India. So you need to be able to study that. The law says only 100,000 rupees, 1,500 US dollars, but we know that it will not last even for a month, especially if you're going to pay rent to for the premises that you or you have a few employees from day one. The other interesting thing to remember is apart from the minimum capital, every private company in India requires to have a local director from day one. So when we fill up the forms as a consultancy, when we incorporate a new company and we fill up the forms online, everything is online now. There is hardly any physical submission. One of the gradual changes that have happened in the last 5 to 6 years. But when we fill up the form, we have to give the details of a local person. The definition of a local is not necessarily an Indian like me, but a foreigner living in India on a work permit. And so his visa number or passport number will also be recorded. His local address shall be recorded. So, and if not him, then the Indians. So this is an important thing for companies to remember, that there needs to be a local director right from day one, and it shall continue throughout the life of the company. There is always a local director, which the authorities can catch hold of if there are some severe non-compliances going forward in the life of the company.
All right. So it seems like there is a trend where countries are essentially eliminating this requirement for a lot of capital to be invested, and Indonesia is getting there, hopefully with the new reforms. What other challenges exist when companies are trying to enter these markets? So Vishnu, why don't you just continue? What else do you see as the most typical challenges that companies are facing?
Right. As a consultancy, one of the services we provide is when we incorporate a company, the very first thing we do after that is have a bank account. Because without a bank account, they can't receive the FDI and they can't disperse the funds to wherever they need to. So opening a bank account is a bit of a challenge in India because of, I think, Basel Convention or something like that. There are now stricter norms. A lot of documents are required by banks to open corporate accounts, whether you're talking about global banks like HSBC or Standard Chartered, or even local Indian banks. The documentation is quite heavy, and often if you have a parent company that is outside India, their documents are required and they have to be apostilled, so in the home country. So this takes a little bit of time, and it generally kind of slows down the things. But there's nothing we can do because these are laws not of individual banks, but from the Central Bank of India, the Apex Bank, which we call as a Reserve Bank of India. So that's challenging. The second part comes very soon in the life of a company. As soon as the investment is made, and now the company has to allocate shares and start using the funds, the reporting, which we call as FDI reporting, it's a mandatory and a time-bound reporting, is also a little bit challenging. Because then you are supposed to get a telex, or I think it's called a SWIFT message from the foreign bank to the Indian bank, and you have to attach it in the documents and upload it once again. And often there is, with so many parties involved, things generally tend to take time. Going forward, in terms of business registrations, and this does not apply to every company, there is an authority in India called Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS for short. They certify products to be sold in India from a safety point of view. Things like a storage water heater in the house, which may burst, or a helmet, which a two-wheeler rider will be using. So these have to be certified. The process of certification is not all that simple. I've been on the wrong side of this registration, so I know. And recently they have expanded the list to cover probably close to 1,000 items. So you have your steel, printers, plotters, whatnot, everything thrown into that mix. So that also is time consuming and a bit of a challenging registration. Finally, food certification. Now, every country around the world, or let's say most of the countries around the world, have their own food licensing authorities just to control the quality of packaged food that is being sold. India is no different. We have a licensing authority for food, but getting the registration from them is easier said than done. Not only for imported food products such as this, a Red Bull, which everyone is familiar with. The one that I'm holding is made in Switzerland, imported by Red Bull in India, and it has a license behind it. If they did not have this license, it would be confiscated at customs and auctioned off. I don't think they will throw it back into the sea, but probably it would be auctioned off. So getting this food certification license is also a tedious and challenging. It's a chicken and the egg. Unless you get the product inside, how do you get the labs to test it? So they allow you a small sample, not to be sold commercially, for the testing labs to test and give you a report that yes, whatever you claim is in the right quantity, and then you are authorized. And you need to have the label and the license number on every packet. So Red Bull in Switzerland, where this was made, had to put it on the back of the can. So these are, according to me, some of the challenging registrations in the country.
Thank you, Vishnu. And what about Indonesia, Miguel? Like, what challenges do you see? I mean, I know that a lot of things are going to change, so we don't know if these challenges are going to remain challenges, or maybe they're going to become bigger challenges. Sometimes, you try to fix things, but they actually end up more broken. So, what do you think? What have you observed?
Very good point. Well, in Indonesia, whenever, I've been here for 15 years already, and whenever I have to speak in a webinar, in another event and so on, and we always cover the challenges, it's sort of evolving, in the last few years. And I'm sort of happy, because, the situation in Indonesia is getting much better than before. Because, for example, even though now, I'm going to mention now a few challenges in terms of regulations and so on and so on. I would say in general that the situation is definitely getting far much better than, to be honest, I expected only a few years ago. Some of the challenges that I will describe is basically, I mentioned before, the regulatory environment in Indonesia. It's not really very clear. It's not really well structured. Hopefully, with this omnibus bill, the situation is gonna improve a lot. But what you just mentioned, as of today, is everything an uncertainty. Like, we all know the situation is going to improve, but we don't know exactly how. Okay, which is quite annoying, to be honest. Okay, so we're just waiting to have all the official regulations coming up probably in the coming weeks. And then again, related to this, the bureaucratic inefficiency in Indonesia. Also related to something that is improving a lot as well, which is the corruption. Well, when I got to Indonesia, again, 15 years ago, I remember one of the first words I learned in Bahasa was corruption, okay, which I think everyone understands, okay, corruption. Nowadays, well, of course there is corruption, like there is in Singapore, in Spain, or whatever, but the corruption in Indonesia, I can say that is far much better also, or I would say is much more controlled, okay, than before. So I think this is something that also the government has been working a lot against this, because again, before, when you thought about Indonesia, automatically you thought about corruption, and nowadays again it's not like that. Then again, the customs and import registration is quite a mess, and this one actually definitely needs some improvement. And then also like Vishnu in India as well, bank account opening, which is also we provide as well. They're asking more and more documents in all sort of banks, local documents, international banks. Everyone is getting more regulated. It's getting probably more complicated, which I understand, and I agree actually why they are taking these measures, but it's getting more complicated. Also, the same as Vishnu. Sorry, I don't have a Red Bull. I don't know what to put, but well, we also have issues here with the product registration of all sort of products, everything, with F&B, we also cosmetics and so on. I wouldn't say it's that difficult, but it's very time consuming. Okay, so, and especially now this COVID-19 has been quite a pain in the neck for most of all the companies that want to, especially start their expansion into the country. Then I would like to mention also, not related to licenses and so on, but more about culturally, I mean, one of the challenges when I see foreigners that want to expand into the country, I mean, you have to understand the cultural differences in Indonesia. Okay, probably it's the same in India, the same in China, the same in all the countries, but you cannot assume that you are in your country. You cannot take assumptions of how Indonesians are going to act. Again, every country is completely different, but some people don't really understand. I would say as well, again, as a challenge as well, is find the right talent. Indonesia, although we are 270 million people, and generally, whenever I mention this fact, 270 million people, I feel great. But now I have two guys here who have actually their countries are bigger than Indonesia. Actually, it's funny to say that Indonesia is the smallest country in this conversation, and we are the fourth largest country in the world. But although we have a big population, they are not so. I mean, Indonesia needs more skillful employees, and there is as we speak, there is a war on talent. I always say this: there is a real and clear lack of talent in the country. We see a lot of Indonesians who live abroad coming back and so on, and getting very good positions in some countries and so on. But well, it's something that at the moment is a problem. Okay, and it's something that needs some solution. Also, that's why there is a lot of the country investing a lot in education and so on and so on. So I think again we're on the right track, and I would like maybe I can leave it here for a moment in terms of challenges.
Yeah, they call them, the Indonesians that are coming back, called sea turtles, because the turtles, they go back where they're born. No matter how far it is, right? So this is what everyone is going after. And I think that came from China, actually, because China experienced the same thing. A lot, actually, there was I don't know if it's still the case, Nick, that's on you to say whether there is a shortage of talent, but there was a time when, people that studied abroad were highly appreciated and they were coming back. And I'm sure that's the case now. So what are the challenges that you're seeing in China today?
So I think a lot of the challenges we're seeing in China when it comes to investing and starting a business in the country really relate to, number one, the requirements behind forming a company. So for example, bank account is a big one. So Vishnu mentioned it earlier. A lot of banks in China still require applicants to fly to the country physically to open an account. And of course, given current travel restrictions, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of investors kind of have to put their plans on hold for a moment. Another primary challenge relates to actually maintaining the company once a business is set up. So there's a lot of annual compliance and monthly compliance requirements that companies are subjected to. For example, in China, you have to do monthly, quarterly, and annual tax filings. There's a lot of rules surrounding employers as well and their relationship with their employees. And there's not too much transparency at the moment. So it's quite frequent that foreigners do kind of get the rules mixed up and find themselves in a situation where they have to address non-compliance, regardless of whether it's intentional or not. Another one we've seen a big challenge is when people are trying to find a physical office space to actually work in China. So when you incorporate a company in China, a registered office address is required. During initial incorporation, a lot of people do use a virtual address as it is allowed. However, the Chinese government does want companies to eventually move into a physical office space. And we've seen a lot of the times we've seen the Chinese government actually perform ad hoc checks on companies to make sure that the address listed in their business registration is actually where they're conducting business. And a big issue we've seen is that a lot of people aren't really taking time to switch over their virtual address to a real physical one. Of course, we understand that it takes time to find one. It takes time to get a lease agreement, especially since physical travel may be required. But this is probably one of the biggest challenges we've seen when it just comes to getting your business up and running. Another challenge we've seen is really pertains to the restricted entity list. So The restricted entity list is just a group of industries where the government has imposed special restrictions on foreign investments. So these restrictions can range from foreign shareholding ratios to acquiring special approvals for certain business licenses, or even limits on the operations of a company. In our personal experience, we've had a lot of requests for assistance in opening a company in China in industries such as financial services or even manufacturing. But one's ability to do so is determined and dictated by their ability to find a local Chinese partner to help them with this venture. This is probably the biggest stumbling block we've seen so far, just because international travel restrictions have made it very hard for investors to kind of make these connections and to start off in certain industries.
All right, well, we did cover quite a few challenges. I don't want to go too much into that direction and just talk about the bad things. I do want to finish on a good note, because I see that we are already getting at the point in time when I would like to get some questions from the audience if they have any. So guys, if you would like to submit questions, just please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and then we're going to address them in the best way we can. But in the meantime, to look at the more positive topic, what are the top 3 fast growth industries? And why don't we start with India? So Vishnu, what are the fastest growing industries in your experience right now?
Yeah, from my experience and from what I see and read around me, it's the online industry in general, so e-commerce, I should say. That's growing phenomenally. And if anything, the last 6 months have helped it to grow even more phenomenally. The healthcare industry, as I talked about a little bit earlier. And then the last one would be IT and technology, high-end technology, high-end manufacturing, and so on. So these are 3 industries where I expect a rapid growth in the next 2 to 4 years. These are the industries to watch out for. So if anyone who's in the audience has anything to do with these industries and is looking for where to invest, apart from China and Indonesia, they can also look at India.
Nice, thank you. And Miguel, what are the top 3 growth industries, fast growth industries in Indonesia?
Also the same, like Vishnu in India, I will say all the digital economy-based industries, actually by 2025 is expected to be worth $130 billion in Indonesia. And within this sector is the e-commerce, definitely by far, is also growing exponentially the last few years, like probably everywhere in the world. It was expected to grow to $40 billion by 2022, I think. But with all this COVID-19 situation, we are going to reach this $40 billion this year, actually. So it's, as you can imagine, doing great and well. And within this sector, or in addition to the e-commerce, I would say all about the 5G industries, telemedicine, online education, electronic payment systems, and so on and so on. Another one I would say is infrastructure. Indonesia is under construction, north to south, east to west, and for the last few years. First time of President Jokowi, he was actually investing a lot in infrastructure. It was a plan of $350 billion that they accomplished. Now there is another plan of $400 billion, that they are actually working a lot on it. For example, including 25 new airports and many more facilities like roads and so on and so on, ports and so on and so on, which is very much needed in the country. Besides the capital, okay, as all of you know, the capital of Indonesia is going to be moved to the island of Borneo, east of Borneo. Apparently, it's going to start next year with all this COVID-19 situation, as you can imagine, was put on hold. And hopefully it's going to be a reality, apparently, in 10 years or so. Anyway, we cannot predict his way. And then, another industry, I would say manufacturing. The government is putting a lot of effort on manufacturing companies. They're actually trying to bring foreign manufacturing companies into the country. And again, as I mentioned before, facilitating, land acquisition and so on and so on. They are having many more industrial parks, the one in Brebes, in Java, many more here in Jabodetabek or near Jakarta. And it's, again, a really big support from the government. Actually, as of today, the manufacturing industry means the 20% of the GDP of the country, and there's a plan to reach 25% by 2030. So the government is really invest in a lot of this. And I will just mention another one also, like Vishnu and probably everyone in the world right now, again, all about healthcare. Healthcare, all these, how do you say, all these digital healthcare and so on. There are so many companies popping up in the last few years in Indonesia that, again, it was very much needed before COVID. And nowadays, yeah, they're actually booming again. Probably even without COVID, these companies will be booming as well. So I think it's doing great.
Thank you. So a lot of, I mean, I guess the biggest difference is the infrastructuring opportunities in the country right now. And what about China, Nick? What are the fast growing industries there?
Yeah, I think the fastest growing industries in China are very similar to those in India and Indonesia. So very leaning towards IT, the digital economy, manufacturing as well, specifically towards high-end electronic hardware. So once again, these are all industries that were been included onto the encouraged industry list. And there's a lot of provinces around China that does provide preferential tax treatments to those to companies who are operating in these industries. We've seen a lot of interest in, for example, cloud computing. Cloud computing, AI, there's a lot of interest in that as well. So it really is, I think, a continuation of the current trends we've seen in the past couple of years. I think this is down to a lot of reasons. Besides opening up besides lowering the barriers for entry, we're seeing a really big expanding domestic consumer base. So there's a big demand for these services domestically. And then policy liberalization as well, and increasing dominance of like Chinese companies. We're seeing them expand globally. This is creating a lot of headwinds and a lot of interest in investment in these industries.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to try to merge questions so we cover more because the audience is already submitting some, and I have some from before from the audience. So I'll do my best to merge them in the best way possible. There is a lot of questions around, can you actually travel to your countries? Can foreigners actually visit right now? And if yes, under what conditions? And maybe Vishnu would like to start first.
Okay, sure. Well, international travel continues to remain a difficult proposition. But that said, India has what is called as air bubble arrangement with few different countries around the world, like United States, France, Germany, and one or two more. Under that, if you already had a visa and a valid reason, so it's not tourism or going to attend a marriage or event like that, mostly business related, then you can travel from those countries where there's a bubble arrangement to India. I know this because very recently one of my clients arrived in India in Mumbai, and before he left his home country, which is Italy, and then he flew to Germany, and from there he took the flight to Mumbai. He was a little nervous as to whether he will be isolated or quarantined at the Mumbai airport, and what happens, what can he do, etc. So, but fortunately, he had all the certifications from the local authorities, and so he was able to arrive with no trouble. But those are exceptional cases. With domestically, you can travel. There are some norms for safety of passengers, but other than that, there is no problem in travel.
All right. And Nick, how are things in China when it comes to traveling for foreigners?
China's starting to open back up. There's a lot of talk about opening travel bubbles as well. Specifically between Hong Kong and China has been the one that's been hotly discussed. It's very, I think it really depends on which country you're coming from. If you're already within China, then traveling around is very easy. But I think it still remains to be seen which countries they're going to start opening up travel for and how that's going to proceed. I think the Chinese government has been quite transparent so far about what the plans are. I think at this point it's just kind of a waiting game to see what developments there are, to see if there's enough positive signs for opening up more restrictions.
Yeah, and while we're staying on you, There is a question regarding opening a bank account right now in China. How much is it harder, and how much harder it is to open a bank account right now as a foreigner when you're setting up a company in this context?
I think the only challenge in regards to opening up a bank account in China would just be the travel issue itself. So a lot of banks are trying to accommodate virtual bank account openings via apps such as Zoom. But once again, it's still very early stages for a lot of banks implementing this. In regards to like the KYC procedures and in regards to the actual due diligence, it's not very hard. It's not more difficult than I would say most places around the world. The only thing you really have to be aware of is just the travel restrictions and how that impacts your plans. But other than that, it's not that bad. From our experience, we've seen clients be able to open up a company bank account in a couple weeks. And we've also seen a lot of individuals leverage existing relationships with their banks. For example, banks in Hong Kong that do have a presence in China, they're able to leverage those existing relationships and open bank accounts through this avenue.
Understood. And last but not least, Miguel, traveling to Indonesia, as we are running out of time, I guess that's going to be the last question we're going to cover. So how is it for foreigners? Is it possible, and under what conditions?
Well, it's recently possible. It's possible with a single entry visa sponsored by a local established company, and it's valid for 60 days. This is actually something rather new, but unless you have this single entry visa, well, obviously you cannot travel to Indonesia unless you hold the quitas, the working permit. Again, also as probably in the rest of the countries, we are allowed to travel within Indonesia, and you just have to present your rapid test, and that's fine. But well, again, going back to your question, yeah, at the moment it's possible.
All right, and I guess that's it for now, as we are running out of time. The very last question was, do we get any certificate by attending today's webinar? Well, yes, absolutely. You can put Greenhouse and all of our brands on that certificate. I think it was very informative. I personally learned a lot. So thank you very much to all speakers today for preparing and for the great answers. I know we didn't cover a lot. I know there is a lot more questions, but I think we did quite all right. So thank you, everyone. And we're going to release this recording, I guess, sometime next week, alongside an article that summarizes all the insights. Thank you.